On this channel, we've seen plenty of inaugurals. A lot of them are new airlines, new aircraft, or special routes. Most routes benefit the industry as a whole, but there's some routes that mean a bit more, at least to smaller groups of people. Aviation is special, has a way of connecting communities and connecting the world. Some of you are aware that I previously graduated from Purdue University. While there, I majored in flight where I learned to fly, learned to teach, and had some of the best years of my life. Countless memories, and let's not forget, it's where I flew my first jet. Despite all that, flying home for the holidays was always an ordeal as there wasn't airports nearby with airline service. The school has its own airport, but other than the high volume of flight training, the only airline flights the airport saw was the charters for sports teams. That changes today, however, as United Airlines launches nonstop service from their hub in Chicago to Purdue University using the regional carrier SkyWest. It may not be as flashy as the inaugurals we've covered previously, but it's special to me, so I had to be here for the first flight. Welcome to Chicago O'Hare, the 7th largest airport in the world and 4th in the US. Last year, when I covered American Airlines business class for the first time, we looked at this airport, which has some of the most famous architecture of any airport out there. Its 4 terminals are appropriately named 1, 2, 3, and 5, considering 4 was a temporary terminal built while 5 was being built. United operates out of Terminal 1 and it has some iconic architecture. To support the expansion of United Airlines in Chicago, the old Terminal 1 was demolished in the early 80s and the new one opened a few years later. Designed with 2 long concourses of gates, one landside and one satellite concourse, the setup of retail and gates is meant to resemble a bustling city street of Chicago. Check out these vaulted ceilings with natural light. Makes for a historical look that people picture and post daily. And that doesn't even include the most famous part, the tunnel between the 2 concourses, with rainbow lighting, sequence lights on the ceiling which makes it feel like you're moving faster than you really are, and Rhapsody in Blue, the anthem of United Airlines. That's all fine and dandy, except that we are flying on a regional carrier. United and American tend to use separate wings for their non-flagship flights. That puts our flight in Terminal 2, used by non-hub carriers and some regional flights. It's definitely the least flashy part of the airport with lower ceilings and a much more cramped feel as compared to the rest of the airport. We are off to the F gates as one of 2 concourses in Terminal 2, where the gates are chock full of regional jets. On all of our inaugurals, we've seen some great parties. Airlines from around the world love to show off their new routes, but we haven't really covered an inaugural like this. This flight isn't really known outside of the tight community of Lafayette, Indiana. In a way, that's what makes it special though. The gate doesn't have any signage or anything really that pays homage to this being an inaugural flight. The only thing that was special was the people. As boarding drew closer, more people showed up, almost all wearing Purdue clothing and talking about, when did you graduate, where did you live, were you in Greek life? It was a small community of Purdue graduates here to celebrate this new linkage between Purdue and the world. I honestly just had fun seeing Lafayette on a departure board for the first time, both in the concourse and at the gate. It's also why so many people ask the gate agent for printed boarding passes, considering United uses a mobile boarding pass as much as possible. These printed passes became the only goodie that we got for the flight. Finally, our plane arrived from Morgantown, West Virginia. Today's flight will be on the CRJ-200 operated by SkyWest Airlines for United Express. The CRJ brand grew out of the Challenger business jet program, launching with the CRJ-100 for Lufthansa, and then the 200 was built with the same airframe but bigger engines. SkyWest has always been the largest operator of the type, where the type's been perfect for low-density routes and, more recently, SkyWest charters. These 50-seat aircraft are great at quick turns as well, so about 25 minutes after it had arrived at the gate, it was our turn to get on board. The gate agent made note of this being the first time they'd be boarding a flight for Lafayette, Indiana, making it the only note that this was an inaugural flight. Unfortunately, as a 22-year-old regional jet, the overhead bins remain an issue. My rollerboard fits in the overhead bins of newer regional jets like the Embraer, but on these aircraft, we get these green tags, meaning they'll put them in the cargo hold, and you can pick it up plane side on arrival, not needing to go to baggage claim, so your connecting flights aren't an issue if you'd like that bag. With that dropped off, welcome on board the 2-2 cabin of the CRJ-200, known colloquially by many names such as the Devil's Chariot or the Lawn Dart for its unique look and flight characteristics. These cabins are old and worn, but fortunately they don't fly all that far. The seats are actually fairly plush compared to the newer products that feel like sitting on a rock, although the seats are fairly narrow, but at least they recline. It's not great, but there aren't many people trying to sleep on these flights. The windows are a major complaint to these jets as they're definitely below eye line, so you either slump down or look down. In front of you, the seats are basic, which is changing in newer regional jets, but there's no in-flight entertainment, just a tray table, although still bigger than Spirit Airlines' tray table, plus a large pocket if you want to store some stuff in here, considering there's always space for a backpack in the overhead bin with all the roller bags checked. I've also found that the legroom on regional jets typically isn't too bad, although it can vary by carrier. I'd argue this is by far more comfortable than Ryanair offers. There's no entertainment box down here, no seat dividers, no life jackets, and the simple design means that you can actually maximize your footroom down here. Plus, if you have a window seat, there's a convenient ledge to prop a foot up on if you'd like. Lafayette, Indiana will always have a special place in my heart, but that does make me biased. So what's the likelihood this route works out? The airport itself is actually the second busiest in Indiana behind Indianapolis, largely because of the sheer amount of training aircraft, but also lots of cargo and a handful of private flights. The university maintains a training fleet over 20 aircraft that go out every 2 hours, keeping the flow of aircraft constant from 7 in the morning to 7 in the evening, and later on some days. Although unfortunately the university shifted from the Cirruses that I flew in my time here, to Pipers since I graduated. At the moment, Flying Magazine had Purdue listed as the #1 collegiate aviation program. Now it's at #2 behind Oklahoma, and while Embry-Riddle loves to boast their aviation program, we got jets. The airport lost commercial flights in the early 2000s, and they've had debates of returning for a while as Lafayette metro area remained one of the largest in the country without airline services. The metro area maintains roughly 250,000 residents, but there's about 50,000 Purdue students, and I'd bet that most of those aren't included in that number. The university remains the main motivator for the new flights, giving students, faculty, family, and guests a way to reach the campus without the long drive, although student travel will likely be heavily centered around holidays. Although sure, the airport, terminal, and airline contract is handled by the university, there's some major industry in Lafayette still. The biggest of which is Subaru, whose American assembly plant is located right in Lafayette. Wabash National is located here as the world's largest semi-truck trailer manufacturer. Caterpillar, the heavy machinery and equipment company, has a large engine center here. General Electric maintains an engine facility in the city where they research the LEAP engines, plus various pharmaceutical companies and other smaller national brands. It's part of the Silicon Prairie that was referenced 10 or so years ago. Partially as Purdue has a global reputation for its engineering, so it makes sense for major companies to have facilities nearby. Last year, US News and Times Higher Education had Purdue ranked in the top 30 best engineering schools in the world. And the last draw is the cargo. There's a constant flow of cargo aircraft at Purdue's airport. In my time there was always at least one DC-9, mostly for Subaru, flying in from South Texas. The problem is that there's not really a way to have a plane that can carry the required cargo and fill enough seats to be profitable. Best case scenario, if you use a plane with a proper cargo hold like a 737 or maybe an Embraer 175, you could mix passengers and cargo from a major hub near South Texas where the majority of the cargo to Lafayette comes from. So maybe we see a Houston route with the Embraer 175 if the Chicago route works out. Personally, I've always felt that there was enough demand to Lafayette to sustain airline service. It's a bummer that it happened years after I graduated and moved on, but I'm just happy it's here, and I hope to see it excel past its 2-year agreement. This flight flew by, pun intended. Only a few minutes after departure, we got a great flyby tour of Chicago in the distance, just behind Midway, Chicago's other main airport. Our filed flight time was only 18 minutes, so we didn't get all that high either. Our cruising altitude was only 15,000 feet and we were only there for 6 minutes. I mean, the seatbelt sign was only off for like 8 minutes the entire flight, so I'd suggest using the restroom before you board. There is a restroom on board, although it's the only one at the rear of the cabin, and it's tight. So if there's an emergency, they've got you covered, but if you can hold it for a little while, you'd probably be better off going before you get on board. By the way, the in-flight experience is fairly basic. Not much time to do anything, but you don't really have an option. There's no Wi-Fi or seatback entertainment on those screens, but you don't really need them. The flights on these aircraft are almost all an hour or less, so just play a game or download a single TV show and you'll be on the ground by the time it's over. Although it's worth noting that there's no charging on board, so be sure to charge your stuff in the terminal as well. There also wasn't much of a beverage service. On flights under 30 minutes, there typically isn't anything served. They did say that they'd bring us something if we requested it, but on this flight, the flight attendant never left the jump seat outside of securing the cabin. They do have stuff on board, and on flights of a bit longer length, you'll typically get a beverage and a snack. This one's just a bit too short. I mean, the taxi at Chicago took us 38 minutes, double the time the actual flight took. Fortunately, on the flight back to Chicago, due to the arrival routing into O'Hare, the flight was a bit longer, and we were able to get a brief beverage service. In 1930, a local inventor donated a plot of land to be used to create the first university-owned airport. Since then, it's seen its fair share of airline services by common airlines like Northwest, United, American, and even served as a hub for Purdue Airlines, which operated charter services and, for a short period, scheduled flights. Now with 2 runways, the longest being 6,600 feet, technically most airplanes can fit here. But if loaded full of passengers, the 757 is the biggest plane I've seen operate there, as sports teams would fly in on airline charters multiple times per week. So we knew the airport could physically support commercial flights, but they needed to up their security. Unfortunately, in 2005, American pulled their Chicago flight, leaving the airport without commercial service. The former terminal became the aviation library, study spaces, and workshops for Polytechnic students. In 2016, it was stated that Purdue getting airline service was a lost cause, but in 2017, under new management, the airport said it was ready to launch commercial flights. The new manager made airline service a priority, but acknowledged that they'd need help from outside the university to make it work. Even still, an analyst and industry strategic expert stated that airlines have pulled out of cities much larger than Lafayette, stating it ain't happening. United even announced they'd be launching multiple new routes from Chicago to small Midwest cities later that year, but Lafayette was left off the list. On the flip side, Champaign, Illinois earned airline flights not long before then, as a college town a similar distance from Indianapolis, which was frustrating as a Purdue student. While at school there, I had to choose between Indianapolis, 90 minutes away, or Chicago, 3 or more hours away. There were shuttle services from campus, but they could be unreliable or expensive on a college budget, so the Greyhound bus was commonly the safe bet. But when the roads were covered with ice and snow in the winter, the drive was even longer. It routinely took me 4 to 6 hours to get from school to O'Hare in the winter months, which is why it was frustrating that the reason for no air service was that it was too close. Finally, in 2023, Southern Airways Express began service from O'Hare to Purdue with Cessna Caravans. They reported 6,000 annual passengers with a 44% load factor, but the belief was that they didn't offer enough connections in Chicago, so there was too much reliance on point-to-point travelers. So, Purdue's Board of Trustees approved a 2-year agreement with SkyWest Airlines, the biggest regional carrier in the U.S. and has contracts for the 4 main U.S. carriers. The agreement stated that SkyWest must maintain at least 1 daily flight from Chicago operating for United Airlines to allow better connectivity for students and guests and faculty through Chicago onto their roughly 200 destinations from Chicago. And just like that, they've managed to turn a 4+ hour drive into a 20-minute flight. I know what I'd pick. In my life, I've probably logged about 1,000 landings on this runway, and now I'm here as a passenger on a commercial flight. It's all a bit surreal. Aviation has a huge role in the world. A lot of us here are fans of the industry. We follow the news, the aircraft, the routes, the whole experience. For others, it's simply a way to connect a city to the world. That's what this service is about. can't believe it took 20 years, but the fact that current and future students, as well as people living and working in the greater Lafayette area, have this connection is incredible. It sounds like the agreement will be a test of sorts to see if the route can be sustained, and a lot of that will depend on the pricing. Fortunately, if you search flights to Indianapolis and include nearby airports, Lafayette will show up, so I'm hoping that will help put this flight on people's radars, whether they want to fly to Lafayette, or maybe they just live north of Indy and now have an alternative. The cost was a worry for me, however. From my home airport of San Francisco, I compared flights to Indianapolis and Lafayette throughout much of the school year, and the Lafayette flights were consistently around $20 to $40 more round trip. While it is more expensive, you don't need to rent a car anymore, and there's no need to drive about 2 hours. That alone could cost you more than $40. I see huge value in this flight, and I'm hoping others do too. But it wasn't just a new flight. I stayed at Purdue for a couple days before I flew home. I visited the old campus, old friends, former professors, my old fraternity, the stadiums, restaurants, everything. I haven't been back in a few years, so I had to soak it all in. But on my way home, I had a chance to experience the other Inaugural Experience, their brand new terminal. Purdue had airline service dating back to the 50s with numerous regional carriers. Those flights were out of their former terminal, which hasn't seen action since the early 2000s except for those caravan flights, so the airport didn't really support post-9/11 security standards. In 2024, the FAA granted Purdue $1.5 million to help with terminal construction. The terminal will sit just west of the old terminal and Hangar 1, which is the oldest bit of the airport, now attached to a newer building of classrooms. This new terminal has a simple floor plan considering it's not meant to handle more than 1 or 2 flights at a time. Inside the doors you'll find the check-in, just one counter for United and one for a player to be named later. There is a baggage claim around the corner, but it's more of just a trough for them to dump the small volume of bags onto upon arrival at the aircraft. Other than that, the room is adorned with university decorations as the university still owns the terminal and airport, plus they're the reason the flights even come here in the first place. Then is a TSA checkpoint back by the entrance. Just one scanner and one lane, but there was never more than 3 people in line at a time, so it only took about a minute. Then you're into the holding area. This area has more than enough seating, so you're never worried about privacy, although charging ports can be a bit tougher to find, but at least you really only need to get here an hour before departure. There's restrooms in here, and while there isn't a restaurant, there are snacks. At the moment, it's all self-serve. You grab whatever you like from these shelves and then pay at the kiosk. You've also got excellent views of this ramp outside where we could watch the chartered aircraft arrive, although less now that there's airline service, the university aircraft, and eventually the CRJ that would be taking us back to Chicago. With the plane just over half full, by the time they called for boarding, we had the doors shut not even 15 minutes later, but that's the perk of these small jets and small airports. But I was reunited with the baby airplane that we flew only a couple days prior. The new terminal is also named after Amelia Earhart, one of the most famous aviators of all time and with solid ties to the university. She and Purdue's President Eliot crossed paths in 1934 at a conference, and Eliot offered Earhart a position at Purdue to work with women enrolling in STEM programs and inspire the next generation of young women. And Earhart said yes. A few weeks each semester, Amelia would live in the new women's dormitory, serve as a counselor for careers, advise Purdue's aeronautics department, and enjoy access to Purdue's new airport, the only collegiate airport at the time. And she held this position until her disappearance in 1937. She maintained a great reputation amongst the women she worked with at Purdue, who said she would sit and talk with each of them whenever they needed during her stay. Purdue was also where Earhart worked on her plans to circumnavigate the globe, and where she planned to return at the conclusion of her journey to use her experiences and aircraft for further research. She even kept her plane in Hangar 1, and the university helped raise money for her journey. To this day, Purdue continues to honor Earhart for her contributions to the university and industry. They maintain the world's largest compilation of Earhart artifacts, papers, memorabilia, even her pilot's license, goggles, jacket, and will. They've launched the Amelia Earhart Scholarship to help women in STEM, and Earhart Hall remains one of Purdue's 16 residence halls, including the Earhart Dining Hall and Earhart statue out front. So with her storied past with the school and especially in aviation, it seemed fitting to name the new terminal in her honor. you ever wonder why airlines fly to tiny airports like this? I mean, there's routes all over the world that operate around 50% capacity, if that, and yet the services continue year after year. It all comes down to something known as the essential air service. This isn't unique to the US, as lots of places have similar practices. The US, however, spends by far the most money on it. Boiling it down, essential air service is a way to subsidize routes so that disconnected markets can travel with ease. When the topic of EAS comes up, the biggest question asked, especially by Europeans, is why we don't just use a train. Honestly, trains can be great on the East Coast, but in the West things are a little spread out, making it difficult for a train to actually connect the places efficiently. So the next best thing is air travel. Not only that, but you can't beat the connectivity. I mean, Purdue University not only has a ton of out-of-state students that have to travel to get here, but especially a huge international student population. These students are now one layover from Delhi, Shanghai, Tokyo, you name it. That's why a flight to Chicago specifically was a priority. Typically, the way it works out is the government will work to bring in a flight connection and will help to make sure the airline doesn't lose money. They promise a certain amount of seats and then the government covers the cost of what remains unsold. Airlines like it because it gives them a way to test new markets, and the cities like it because it gives people a way to travel without having to drive for hours to reach their next closest option. Some of these routes are served by mainline carriers like United's service to Prescott, Arizona. Others are served by smaller commuter airlines like Denver Air Connection to Cortez, which we covered previously this year. Regardless, you can bet that it'll be a small aircraft, so while it does cost the government some money, it allows for more opportunities for smaller cities and the people nearby, possibly bringing in more money than it will cost initially. That's it for now. The CRJ isn't exactly the best experience out there, but it serves a unique role that can't be matched by many other aircraft, especially now that carriers are retiring their turboprops as passengers don't like seeing propellers anymore. I will say that some places give extra love to regional jets. Other than these ultra-small jets, most of them now rock a domestic first-class cabin, even if it's only a few seats. Air Canada even puts TV screens and charging ports on CRJs. But I guess it's a good thing that the range these aircraft are so limited. The longest CRJ-200 flights in the world are in Russia, being about 3 hours long. In the US, there's a collection of flights just over 2 hours, but none of them cross the 3-hour mark, and as far as I'm concerned, if I know that I'm getting that experience, I can charge up my devices and be plenty happy for a flight that short. That being said, not all these flights are operated by CRJ-200s. This route is signed up for 11 times weekly. It'll fly daily as an overnight for the crew, arriving around 11 p.m. and departing at 6:30 the following morning. And then this itinerary in the daytime will operate 4 times weekly. The daytime flight will remain a CRJ-200, but it appears that the late flight is operating with a CRJ-700. Those aircraft are a bit bigger, with some more rows. Still not enough space for rollerboards, but they do have Wi-Fi, although no power outlets still. Most importantly, for some people, the 700s have a first-class cabin. This means that you can fly your entire journey in a premium cabin if you're on the evening flight to Purdue or the morning flight back to Chicago. Honestly, that would be my first choice going forward. And lastly, inaugurals are fun. There's a certain energy about them. Sometimes that comes from the airline, sometimes it comes from the people. I've maintained that the best inaugural I ever took was the United Manila flight, but mostly because the Filipino people know how to party. So on this flight, even if the airline didn't have any fanfare, the people brought the excitement, and it was still fun to be a part of. But while I definitely don't expect the full long-haul international scale of celebration, it would be nice to have something for this being the first flight. Aviation does a great way of connecting people, and this new flight to Lafayette, Indiana is just the most recent example. But what's a flight that's special to you? Maybe one that exists, or maybe one that you wish existed. Let me know below, and until next Sunday, safe travels. I'll see y'all next time. And remember,